Jonah Jackson, guard for the Rams, name that emerged today to seek a trade. A guy that I spoke to on SI's Rams reporter today and said, what happened? Why is he on the block? And why did things go wrong in LA? And he said things didn't go wrong. The problem is that they brought him in to be a starter while I'm not going to remember the name, was supposed to be a center. He couldn't make the transition to center, so he had to play guard. Unfortunately, that meant Jackson had to go to the bench because, well, they were going to play the future instead of the right now, which I think that decision works out a lot of times in the NFL, and most times they know exactly what they're talking about. But now he's on the block. He's making 14 point some million dollars in 2025. Next year, it's 22 point some. There's an out with a $5 million dead cap at the end of the 2025 season. I mean, I'm sure that the Rams would probably take most of that on to be able to say that the Steelers or any other team could make this trade a little bit easier down the line. I asked what would compensation be for a name like this one. I tossed out a 4th round pick. I got a maybe like that might be where the Rams are willing to settle. It's probably not what they're looking for, but it may be where they're willing to settle. He comes in here. He's a natural left guard, which you say what you want. That's okay. I get it. Isaac Seumalo, but Isaac Seumalo is here for 1 year. Then you have decisions to make. I look at it as a name that could come in, compete with Mason McCormick, allow Mason McCormick maybe to earn the starting job over him, which I get it. Expensive backup, but earn the starting job over him. And one of them, whether it's McCormick or Jackson, starts next year at left guard where Isaac Seumalo is. I mean, maybe not the worst name. We've talked Trey Smith on this show. That name was not realistic. Jonah Jackson might be in the realm of realistic. I don't know how realistic, but might be in that conversation. You look at Jonah Jackson, a guy who's got starting experience, who's only 28 years old. I've heard very good things about him, his character and his drive. Do you think that's an option for the Steelers?
It makes sense as to what we were talking about earlier in the offseason, whenever they obviously started looking at Gray Zabel and they started saying that they might be looking to bring in somebody to compete with Mason McCormick. But at the same time, it does concern me a little bit that we're moving somebody off of their natural side again. I mean, How many times can the Steelers do that and realize that they're better off putting people in their natural position and allowing them to grow from there? I understand versatility is a skill set that is admired and asked about from every NFL franchise, but it's just simply not worked for the Steelers. So that is what concerns me a little bit, is that this guy is a natural left, and I understand that Isaac Seumalo has 1 year left on his current deal, but at the same time, are you bringing in $14 million and a guy that was injured twice last season and then benched by the end of the season to compete with an Isaac Seumalo who has injury issues of his own, or move him to his opposite side and potentially suffer the same fate that you did with Kevin Dotson, or suffer the same fate that you're currently suffering with Broderick Jones? That's the part that worries me a little bit. I don't know enough about Jonah Jackson to say, hey, he can switch to right. He has that in his bag. But if he does, it makes it a little bit more clear for me. The one thing I'm curious about is it in his bag? And can he make that adjustment?
Yeah, I agree. Can you make that? If he can, that's huge. That's a big turning point here that I believe does change some things in this conversation. But I agree with you. If you're going to give up a draft pick, if you're going to give up $15 million, like that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money for a guy that you're not certain on. If you were certain Jonah Jackson was the guy, he was going to start, he was going to be the guy over Mason McCormick, I get it. I'm all about it, to be honest with you. I think Jonah Jackson's got a lot of potential. I think he's very good where he is right now. And I think that the Steelers could use a guard. Like, I like Mason McCormick, but that does not mean that I need Mason McCormick to start in 2025. That's not what I don't need that. If there are better options available, I think you can learn and develop behind 2 quality veterans and step into a starting role next season. I just don't know if Jonah Jackson's that guy. In my head, I think the perfect outcome for the Pittsburgh Steelers this offseason, very simple. Go re-sign Nate Herbig, because I look at Nate Herbig as a guy that, when healthy, was good. I had no problem with him starting at center. I had no problem with him eventually becoming a starting guard for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like, I thought Nate Herbig showed a lot of potential. I thought he was a quality guy. He's not a starter on 32 teams, but he could be a starter in Pittsburgh and one that you could rely on when he is out there for sure. He's 26 years old, so he's super young. You're going to get him for no money at all. And the way I look at this is that's the competition. Like, that's the perfect level of competition for Mason McCormick for me to say, if Mason is better than Nate Herbig, great. Then you have Mason McCormick be your starter. And if he's not, then he has room to grow, which is totally fine. And Nate Herbig is starter quality. I feel like that scenario just gives the Steelers exactly what they're looking for: competition at the right level without making it impossible, without bringing in somebody that you have to make the starter or somebody that is so head and shoulders above Mason McCormick that this isn't even fair. And that you could look at as a starter, did look at a year ago as a starter, and I thought played pretty well when he was playing center, and I thought he played better at guard. So if he's healthy, the shoulder is an issue, obviously, but people overcome shoulders. It's not like he ripped his leg in half, rotator cuff. That's not the worst injury in the whole world. I kind of look at Nate Herbig as like the perfect situation for the Steelers. Am I wrong here? Do you feel differently?
No, it makes a lot of sense, especially considering the Steelers internally loved Nate Herbig. I mean, all of us were shouting from the mountaintops last year whenever they drafted Zach Frazier. Why is he not getting the starters reps right away? And they're saying because, well, we like Nate Herbig, and that's the reason we brought him back, to be that perfect conduit between getting into the NFL and being ready for the NFL. So if he was able to be in that position for Zach Frazier, he can be in that position for Mason McCormick. And again, we have said a number of times that we were happy with what we saw from Mason McCormick. Was it perfect? No, but we also saw 200 times more of Mason McCormick than was planned to see going into last season. So bringing back Nate Herbig, a guy that internally is very well liked by the Pittsburgh Steelers organization, makes a lot of sense. And I understand that you want to spend more money on offense, but if you save that money and get a veteran in Nate Herbig that's going to cost you less than Jonah Jackson, you can go out and spend that money on wide receiver. You can go out and spend that money on your quarterback. You can go out and spend that money on maybe another running back as well. You can spend it on the more fun areas of the offensive side of the ball, and also in the defensive side of the ball, the areas that you need to fill. So I like that idea. And honestly, it's an idea that Coach said here in the comment section. And if you didn't bring it up, I was going to bring this up right away at the same time, which was, nobody's talking about Nate Herbig. Why aren't we talking about Nate Herbig? So I'm glad you brought it up.
Yes, I agree. I just think Nate Herbig is the perfect outcome here. And the Steelers love that guy. He was around all season, most of the season while he was rehabbing. And he fits what they need. They have a very specific need this offseason. He fits that, and the best part about it is if he works out, that's the best case scenario for the Steelers, is if he is better than Mason McCormick, because that gives Mason a year to develop, move to his natural side on the left to replace Isaac Seumalo. And then you have Nate Herbig, who's 27 years old at the time, as your starting right guard of the future. I just feel like, why would you not give that guy an opportunity? I understand he's not Trey Smith. There's some big giant name, but I think he's a name that fits perfectly for now and later for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Name him to watch,